Welcome to Dark Minds, Shattered Lives, where we expose predators, dive into the minds of evildoers, and help you and your loved ones avoid them. I'm your host, Deborah Dobbs. I'm an author and victim advocate with a reputation for rattling cages. There's a serial killer that you might never have heard of. His name is Billy Chemirmir. And there's a city in Texas called Plano. You might not have heard of that either. Billy Chemirmir is likely the most prolific serial killer in our history, at least in the United States history. There have been documentaries made about Billy Chemirmir, but I still run into people who have no idea who he is, who've never heard that name. They know Ted Bundy, they know Richard Ramirez, John Wayne Gacy, but they never have heard of Billy Chemirmir. And he killed more people than all of those serial killers combined. And if he had kept his evil doing in Dallas, he probably would have gotten away with it. He made the mistake of going into Plano, and Plano doesn't play. Billy Chemirmir was caught thanks to some tenacious investigators at Plano Police Department. But you wouldn't know that they were the ones responsible, because you got some people in Dallas that were happy to get in front of the cameras. I wasn't aware until I saw a post by Doug Deaton, who is retired. And one of the great things about talking to retired detectives is that they can speak freely. They're not worried about the repercussions. The truth can come out, and they don't have to worry about getting fired or being persona non grata at the DA's office. So Doug Deaton is joining me again, and he's going to share some truth that you won't hear in any documentaries about Billy Chemirmir. There's a few out there, and they're good. But what you're going to hear from Doug today, you will not hear in those documentaries. This is part one of how the Billy Chemirmir investigation really went down. Okay, so back with Doug Deaton, and I'm going to read this message. It was a post on Facebook. Is that correct?
It was.
Okay.
I wrote this after the documentary came out.
That was in May 2024.
Yes.
All right. Anyone who has elderly family members should watch this 3-part series. I don't normally air other people's dirty laundry on social media, but I'm going to make an exception here, and I hope you will share it. I was a lieutenant over crimes against persons at the Plano Police Department when this happened. This was one of the last major investigations I oversaw before I left police work in 2021. Billy Chemirmir murdered many women throughout the Dallas area, but it was line officers and detectives at the Plano Police Department who did the heavy lifting on these investigations. This occurred because Plano PD leadership correctly understood the severity of the situation and assigned capable personnel to work exclusively on these offenses for nearly 2 years. Plano PD investigators proved Chemirmir committed murders in multiple North Texas cities, and then they handed that proof to other agencies on silver platters so that Chemirmir could be prosecuted in Dallas County. I was middle management at Plano PD during this investigation, so my role was entirely administrative. I primarily focused on ensuring that my detectives had what they needed to do their jobs and removing obstacles that might hinder their progress. I was also responsible for interagency cooperation and information flow. This sometimes included attending multi-agency meetings of the higher-ups from other police departments, district attorneys' offices, medical examiners' offices, etc. I was either present for or participated in conversations, phone calls, and meetings that were among the most frustrating episodes of my career. After speaking with or listening to members of several local government organizations in Dallas and Dallas County, it became clear that certain bosses with significant authority at those agencies simply did not care about old women near the end of their lives being murdered in retirement homes. Decent working cops at Dallas PD did their best to investigate the Chemirmir murders in their city, but key members of DPD command staff refused to allocate the personnel or resources needed to investigate previous deaths at assisted living facilities. It was obvious that these particular DPD bosses did not want to hear that numerous natural deaths of elderly women were actually murders. Some of those same decision makers later stood in front of news cameras and acted as if they had fully supported the investigation from the beginning. To be fair, I do not believe this would have occurred had Chief Eddie Garcia been running Dallas PD at the time. Dallas County DA John Creuzot initially committed to seeking the death penalty, but later reneged on that commitment. I don't have anything positive to say about his, quote, leadership in this or several other criminal matters. There is little doubt that Billy Chemirmir murdered hundreds, plural, hundreds, of senior citizens. The inaction, indifference, and dishonesty of managers at multiple North Texas retirement homes empowered this serial killer to prey on elderly residents with impunity for years. In a just world, those managers would be dragged out to a field somewhere and shot. To the handful of bosses at Dallas PD who could not be bothered or shamed into doing your jobs, you should resign, move to another state, and live out the rest of your days in a shack someplace where honorable people never have to see you again. May God bless the police officers and detectives at Plano, Dallas, Frisco, and Highland Park who did their duty and pursued justice with compassion for the victims and their families in the face of darkness and apathy. So what kind of response did you get after that?
Well, so I was surprised. I was surprised at the response that I got. Again, I posted that publicly on Facebook, and a whole bunch of people who I did not know began to share it and tagging other people, and then I began to get friend requests from the family members of victims. And then I began to receive messages from the family members of victims who then also began to email me. So I ultimately ended up being contacted by probably 15, if I had to guess. I haven't counted it. I'm just estimating. Probably 15 different family members of approximately 15 different victims. Again, which doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of the number of victims that are really out there.
The documentary is on Paramount right now, and it's the Pillowcase Murder.
Yeah, Pillowcase Murders, I believe.
Okay.
I want to be very clear. I was not one of the primary investigators who did the heavy lifting in this case. I was a lieutenant in that, and so as I said in the post, my role was primarily administrative. But that doesn't mean it wasn't very stressful for me as well, trying to deal with these different government entities, local government entities, and being in a room full of district attorneys, watching them have their own conflicts over this, and frankly, watching the Dallas County District Attorney's Office try to weasel out of it. They eventually made a commitment to seek the death penalty, and then they reneged on that commitment.
Why did they even have it? Why was this not in Collin County? When Plano is
it was in Collin County as well.
Oh, that's right. They dismissed.
So, and to be fair, I'm not criticizing the Collin County DA's office at all on any of this. But one thing that many people don't understand, I myself did not understand this until I'd been a police officer for 20-something years. I did not realize this. And this is in any state, not just Texas, any state that has the death penalty, that if you successfully prosecute a death penalty case, at the minimum, you are looking at about $1 million of future appeals. Mm-hmm. And so when district attorney's offices, or however you want to call it, some states use different terms, but the prosecutor, the district attorney's office that's responsible for prosecuting these cases, they have to budget for that. So when they go for the death penalty, in any case, they have to just know ahead of time that we're going to have to set aside $1 million right now, this year, not in the future, not next year, we're not going to get to just pay it off at the car payment. We're going to have to put aside $1 million into a special account, and that will be the money that's going to pay for all of the future appeals that we know are coming. And so that eventually when we do put this guy to death 10 years from now, we will have, gotten through all of that. Now, that is an ugly and practical reality of death penalty cases, and there's no getting out of it.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and so at that time, Collin County already had a couple of death penalty cases. One of them was the guy that murdered Richardson police officer David Sherrard. Mm-hmm. So that was one. There was another one also. I think that was also out of Plano.
He killed another that night.
Yes, he killed his own friend and
Yeah.
who had his friend who had given him a safe place to stay.
Yeah.
So that was one of them. So Collin County already had 2 death penalty cases for that year already, and there was a significant number of these cases which had occurred in Dallas County.
Mm-hmm.
Dallas County didn't really have a whole lot of death penalty stuff going on at the time. Again, you have to have these kind of practical conversations. I was present for this discussion. And so, yeah, I get it. I mean,
But he said he would pursue the death penalty.
correct, he did. Yes, he did. And then later changed course on that. The other issue we have here is that murders and murder statistics are political. And that's another thing that many people don't know. If anyone has ever seen the TV show The Wire,
Mm-hmm.
I think it was, it may have been season 2. I don't recall, but where they determined that there was a whole bunch of bodies that had been locked, in the show, there's a whole bunch of bodies that had been put away in these row houses somewhere and that had not been accounted for. Nobody knew about them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and then remember the bosses did not want that detective to go in there and find them, because if he did, that was going to make their murder stats go way up for the year.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's real.
Mm-hmm.
That's very, very real. That's a TV show, but the same phenomenon was occurring here. It was very apparent to me that there were bosses I'll just say down in the Dallas area, who did not want to know that there were going to be an additional 20 to 30 murders added to their statistics for the year.
So this wasn't necessarily, oh, you're just being emotional because you're sad that your mother died. This was deliberate, you think? There's like, no, we don't want a murder, so we're going to accept this as a natural causes.
Yeah, so the other issue we have here, yes, is that most of these had already been determined to be, or have been ruled to be natural causes, again, because these are all very, very elderly women.
But they were vibrant.
Yeah, many of them were vibrant, yeah. But there was a lot of exhumations that had to occur, something which, I didn't really know a whole lot about. I still don't. Mm-hmm. There's a lot that goes into exhuming a body.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot to get that done. And when you start talking to a local government entity and the state about, hey, we may need to exhume 30 bodies, that's not something that people want to hear about.
Mm-hmm.
And when bosses who are already under a great deal of pressure about the number of murders that have occurred in their jurisdiction, realize that you have another police department, next door telling you, hey, dude, I think you actually have 40 more murders than what you think you do. And they're like, hey, they never came out and said it, but it was resoundingly clear in the implications, tone of their voice, that they were not happy about it.
Because Plano was saying, hey, you may have
Yes.
many, many, many more.
Many.
And how many murders were there in Plano? Do you remember about?
I don't recall how many now. I'm embarrassed to say that, but I don't remember. What I do remember is that we would have weekly meetings about this investigation as it was continuing to expand. So I remember one of the first meetings where we realized somebody in the meeting said, my God, this guy may have killed like 20 women.
But Plano didn't balk at that.
Not at all. No. And then the next meeting we had, it was like, oh, we know he's killed. There's no doubt he's killed that many. And then it was like, God, he could have killed 50.
Mm-hmm.
And the next meeting it was, he could have killed as many as 100 people. And then by the next meeting, it was, he's killed at least 100, probably 200 or more. We're never going to know how many people he killed. As bizarre as that sounds, me sitting here saying that, some of your listeners may think this is exaggeration or hyperbole. It's not.
No, he's like the most prolific serial killer perhaps in history.
Possibly in history, yes. And did all of it with a pillow.
Oh.
Just smothering these women, and one man too. So when you start getting around the practical, trying to work through these practical realities of money and staffing and time and other cases that are holding, other cases that are pending, and then you go and you try to tell another city that you have solid evidence that they've had far more murders in their city than what they realize. But in order to prove that, we're going to need to exhume some bodies, but also, hey, here's some digital evidence, here's some photographic evidence, here's this, that, and the other. Some pretty hard evidence that supports exhuming bodies, and that supports also getting the medical examiner's office to change their previous determination. You can imagine the organizational resistance that you would get to something like that.
Is that just territorialism? Like, you don't tell us?
Well, there was a little bit.
You had so much evidence.
Yeah, there was a little bit of that to it, but it was more like, what? They never said these words, so I don't want to mischaracterize anybody, but the overall message from multiple people in the Dallas area was, why are you doing this? Why are you trying to change it? Why are you trying to bring all this up now? What do you expect us to do with this? You know, I mean, we don't have your resources. I mean, we can't just, what do you expect? We already got a whole bunch of other murders that just happened. Fresh murders of young people. What do you want us to do? Drop all that and start investigating a bunch of murders of 80 and 90-year-old women? You know, they've been in the ground for how many years now? What do you want from us, Doug? You know, that was the general message and tone. Then there was a couple conversations that turned a little harder, and it was just like, okay, all right, if that's what you want to do, we'll take a look at it. I tell you what, you send us whatever you have, and we'll be happy to take a look at it. Okay, all right. Hey, thank you for calling. I appreciate you, Doug. Yeah, it was that kind of tone and kind of attitude kind of thing. Plano did have the resources and the personnel and the ability to devote exclusively to this investigation. And some other agencies, including big ones, that don't always. But you'd expect a little bit more.
But you did so much. Y'all did so much.
Those detectives did in multiple cases. All they had to do was just cut and paste, literally cut and paste all of the reports and the write-ups and the evidence and just put it into whatever their format was and file it with the DA. I mean, we had it all.
Did anyone seem like they wanted to investigate? Because
yes, there were.
Okay, because it seemed like even the lower, the line officers, didn't seem interested.
So I know that's kind of how it comes across. Some in some case, what I saw, or at least what I observed for the most part, was the detectives wanted to do the right thing.
Okay.
The line officers wanted to do the right thing. Dallas PD eventually said, "Tell you what, we're going to put one detective on it full time for 10 days. And then after that, he starts catching cases again. So you got one guy on there for 10 days. And then we'll still let him work on it, but he's still going to work his other cases too. Like, okay, so we're going to put 30, 40 possible murders on this guy? One guy. So you're going to let him work on that exclusively for 10 days. But then after that, he has to start going.
You couldn't even be getting started, I wouldn't think, in 10 days.
No, you can't. So it was overwhelming. It was overwhelming to everybody that worked on it when they began to realize the size and scope of it.
Since you're retired now.
Yeah.
Could you say, okay, well, it was the chief who did this and it trickled down? And
it was never the chief, ever.
Okay.
It was chiefesses, as I like to call them. It's multiple. So it's multiple bosses at multiple levels, And when you start dealing with larger organizations, there's often a diffusion of responsibility, and almost like that old Abbott and Costello routine: who's on first, what's on second, And but you also have to keep in mind it's not just one level of government, a local government. It's a county level too. So you have county and city, and then you also have an ME's office.
That got me was the ME's office.
Yeah. So
it just seemed so. Well, sometimes they didn't even get to the ME because he would clear it. And the daughters, several would say, she's in a straight line.
Yeah.
And this is here. This is never there.
I think there was a lot of family members that weren't listened to because, and it's true, in many cases, people are hysterical. And people do, when their loved ones die, they sometimes do every now and then make false accusations of jewelry missing. That's a common accusation, which sometimes is not always true, and sometimes it is. And so I'll just say that it's easy for a cynical, jaded cop. It's easy for a cynical, jaded ME or director of an assisted living center to say, it's just more of the same BS. It's just a bunch of family members making a bunch of noise.
They're older, they're elderly, they died.
Yeah, and
that's what happened.
Yeah, that's it. And so that was the challenge, that trying to get other entities to take it seriously. But as the evidence began to mount, and as the people at Plano began to gather hard evidence and digital evidence, photographic evidence, and statements.
And it came from law enforcement.
Yes.
Then they started listening.
Yeah, it became irrefutable.
It's some kind of phenomenon, I think, as you see it with surgeons. I mean, we dealt with, this is anecdotal, but I know I've talked to others who've had similar experiences. Like my father, many years ago, he died a couple years ago. Many years before that, he had diverticulitis, really bad. He had this incredibly high tolerance to pain.
Yeah.
Which got him into trouble. And so it got really bad. They take out part of his colon. And then the surgeon, we didn't know this was going to happen. He went on vacation the day after that surgery. And so these other surgeons came in, kind of checking on him. And he was bloated. He looked like the Michelin Man. He said he felt like he'd had a Thanksgiving dinner. He didn't want to eat. And friends that were actually doctors too came in. They're like, something is wrong. And they were so dismissive. And my mom, it's like, she's known him for decades.
Right.
Something is wrong. Oh, it's just post-op swelling. She went around them, got the hospital, the general, like a GP at the hospital, listened to his gut for seconds and said, he's got to go to emergency surgery. He was septic.
Oh, wow.
And the other day I call Allen PD. We give him the address, disputes me on whether or not I'm in Allen.
Right. Yeah.
I know where I live, man. I don't know what that is.
Well, it's sort of that dismissive thing.
Like they don't want to be bothered.
Well, it's like you're adding to my workload. Yeah, you're about to add to my workload, and you're actually going to make me have to get up and get out of here, step out of my cubicle and go out into the field and do some serious digging and work. And human beings are lazy, and that you see that a lot. You do.
Is that new, or because Wayne said that's like the first sign they don't want to take the report, or they don't want to investigate.
That's correct.
And he said guys did it back then too.
It's a common thing. It's common. I hate to say it, but when I was when I was lieutenant, I was over all the cold case stuff. I would go back and look at some of these cold case files. And it was really fascinating to read some of the case notes written in the 80s by detectives. Handwritten stuff, or typed on a actual typewriter with a ribbon on it. But sometimes it was just incredible what you would read, and you could see this guy is sharp, he's intelligent, he's articulate, and he's talking about, hey, I called the XYZ police department, 15 times asking for Detective so-and-so to call me back about this case, and he wouldn't call me back or whatever, and sometimes they would just document in there about, basically, this guy's a lazy SOB. Mm-hmm. He doesn't want to do his job. I can't get any traction out of the XYZ police department. And these are cops writing this in their own, investigative notes.
That blue line is BS.
Yeah, some of the strongest critics of poor police work are other cops.
Oh, yeah.
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 So to answer your question for the listeners, no, that's it's been going on forever, because human beings are lazy and cops are human beings, and you're going to get a certain number that are in there, especially if I'm calling you up to tell you, hey, how would you like to increase your workload by 500%? I wouldn't like that very much, Doug. Well, here it is. This is what's really going on in your city. And so, yeah, there's a lot of people that are not receptive to that.
So what was different in Plano?
I think it was a willingness to devote people full-time to it. And to be fair, Plano does have the resources to do that. But putting some detectives on it full time, and I mean the chiefesses coming down and saying, "Hey, you two are not going to be working any other cases except these. So you will be working these full time." They would let the chain of command know, do not assign, pick out these people, pick out whoever. Do not assign them any other cases. That whatever workload they would have been working on, you're going to have to spread that out amongst other detectives. These two detectives will work on these, the Billy Chemirmir murders exclusively. And then, we brought in somebody else to do nothing but catalog the items that we knew had been stolen or had been reported stolen, and then go and cross-reference that with items that had been sold at gold and silver, resale shops, and then try to figure out, okay, this is the piece of jewelry that, a family member had a picture of on her finger. This is the piece of jewelry that was sold at this gold shop down in Dallas. It's the same ring. And that we can go and look at, okay, and now we see him in the parking lot on the, security camera, or we see his car driving down there. We have some geodata or, some, license plate reader data or some, other imagery that proves that he went to that shop on that day and sold these items there. So, and then that was the same day that lady supposedly died of natural causes in this assisted living center, in whatever city. So we're talking about thousands and thousands of pieces of jewelry that had been stolen and sold over the years. And so that in and of itself is a full-time job.
Yeah.
Just tracking that down. So
let me back up. Do you remember when you learned that Creuzot was not going to pursue the death penalty? And why do you think he said he would?
Well, it was I mentioned earlier, murder is political.
Uh-huh.
And there's an awful lot of angry people that were very upset about their family members being murdered, and it's finally hit the media, and it was a big deal, and it was political. And the DA is a elected position. And so it's not going to look very good for you to say that you're not going to seek the death penalty when you have dozens of murders, committed. But if you wait a while, what I've noticed in law enforcement and local government, no matter what the issue is, it doesn't really matter what the issue is, pick any issue you want. It flares up. There's the initial explosion. There's the initial mushroom cloud on the horizon. There's the initial heat in the blast wave. There's a great wailing and gnashing of teeth.
Mm-hmm.
But you just wait a little while. You wait 6 months, 9 months, a year. It fades. And then if that issue has not been fully adjudicated, or it maybe hasn't even been prosecuted yet, well, then you can change your mind on things quietly. And really, very few people are even going to notice, Did
the families, do you think? Did they?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There were some family members that were pretty hot.
I mean, he got the death penalty. He got the street justice, but...
Yeah. Well, the other thing, too, is that there's a lot of conversations that take place with the victims' family members. And those conversations sometimes occur with groups, sometimes in pairs or, triplets, what have you. But what I do recall is there were some statements made to the effect of, we made this decision in conjunction with the victims' family members. Well, some of them, but not all of them. I think that there were some conversations with enough victims' family members who were okay with him spending the rest of his life in prison. But they didn't talk about the other victims' family members who were like, no, dude, you made a commitment to us last year about this, and you swore to us that you were going to seek the death penalty, and now you're telling us that you're not.
Yeah.
And, but actually, I'm not speculating on that. Some of the people that contacted me after I wrote that post told me that. So I'm sure that it is true that the Dallas County DA's office did, in fact, make that decision in conjunction with or the support of a certain number of family members.
Who knows what those conversations were really like?
You don't know.
Because they could have just presented this argument for life and said, because of blah, blah, blah. And then they're like, okay, we get it. We understand. And that may have been the whole thing.
It could have been that. Yeah, there's no way to know.
I've been with victims when they have been presented with the plea agreement option. And it has rarely ever welcomed any input from the victim.
That's true.
It's just, I've actually been brought down. One time I was brought down to be there to try to help calm a victim because they really did not think they were going to get a conviction.
Yeah.
They felt the guy had done it, but they really didn't know if they'd get a conviction. And he was young. And they said, but if we do this plea agreement, at least
Yes.
he will have to get treatment and he will be held, he'll have a probation officer and all of that. And I understood that. But there are times when they're doing these plea agreements, you'll see that come up in my book as a theme.
Yeah.
There were very few prosecutors that I would praise.
Well, so that's the other issue that many people don't understand about prosecutors is that that's an entity unto itself. It's its own layer or level of government. It's which works independently of the police department, sheriff's office, ME's office, or anybody else, right? It's an elected position. That's an executive, that's a member of the executive branch.
Mm-hmm.
And they oftentimes when they talk to victims and victims' families, they're explaining to them, this is the best deal you're going to get. And it's more of a sales thing.
Yes.
And you're like, hey, I know that you wanted the Cadillac. Or I know you wanted the Denali package. The best we're going to get is a 1976 Ford F-150. And that's what you're going to get here. So do you want a Ford F-150 from 1976 or do you want nothing? Which one do you want?
Mm-hmm.
I guess we'll go with the Ford F-150. Okay, we have the support of the victim's family.
Yes.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And there are ugly realities about prosecution. There are. And very, very few DAs want to prosecute a case that they think they're going to lose. That's why, because they often tout their win to loss ratio. They want to keep that in the high 90s, which is why they often don't prosecute cases if they think there's even a hint of a chance they're going to lose.
It's hard to, stalking was one that would constantly come up.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's hard to prove.
Well, it is hard to prove.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you shouldn't take a shot at it.
Right. Or kick back the case. The police put together a good case and they kick it back. It's like they've done all this work for you.
Right.
And they just kick it back.
So I've heard detectives talk about one of the most frustrating things that they encounter. Well, before I say this, I just want to make sure the listeners know that the mission of every district attorney everywhere, and usually it's codified somewhere, it's written down somewhere, and it says it's not to win cases or it's not to prosecute cases, it's not to put bad guys away. It's written down. Usually it says it's to ensure that justice is done. And that's literally their mission. Okay. Same in Texas. The mission of every single district attorney's office in the state of Texas is to ensure that justice is done. And so now back to my point, detectives have talked about doing all this work, extensive work, to send a case up, and they get a letter back from the DA's office that says, in the interest of justice, we are declining to prosecute this case. And that's it. You call them up, you're like, hey, what's going on? And they're like, man, I don't know. It's above my pay grade. Hey, look, I'm sorry, dude. I sent it up to so-and-so and they're just not going to take it. They're just not going to do it. Why not? I don't know what to tell you, Doug. They're just not going to do it. Well, there's some other things going on that I'm not supposed to talk about, but they're just so in the interest of justice, we are declining to prosecute this case, right? And so you're like, well, that's it. You're done. It doesn't matter how big an agency you are. It doesn't matter how much evidence you think you have. It's not under your purview.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get to tell them whether they should or shouldn't prosecute a case. So it's very frustrating. So yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that Billy Chemirmir murdered hundreds of women. There's no doubt in any of those detectives' minds that worked on that either. The one thing about that documentary is that one, and I'm not going to say his name because I don't think he wants any mention, but one of the detectives who did every bit of his fair share of heavy lifting in that case, he didn't appear anywhere in there. His name isn't mentioned. It's as if though he doesn't even exist because he's no longer with the Plano PD. He works for a state agency somewhere else doing something unrelated to police work. He left after 20-something years in, and he left. And
did that case inspire him to leave?
oh no, I don't think I don't think so. Private guy.
Wonder why they didn't mention him. You think it was the people that made the documentary because he wasn't available?
I don't know, but
you're not going to say his name.
I don't want to say his name because I don't have his permission to say his name.
Okay.
He's a super impressive guy though, and I think the world of him.
They highlighted others, one in particular more than others. Yeah. And I don't know if it's because they like the face. It wasn't somebody who was particularly well spoken.
Yeah.
The cataloger.
Right. Yeah. Again, human beings being what they are. Again, cops are human beings, so they're not immune to all of that. And so you find people that seek the limelight and that actively seek out credit for things that where yes they were involved and yes they helped carry the load, but they were one small part of a much larger effort. But when the cameras come out, those kind of people sometimes run to get right in front of that camera as quickly as possible. That's what I'll say.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
believe it.
I mentioned earlier some of those ugly conversations or ugly phone calls, with the tone, with certain people in the Dallas area. I'm not going to say who or specifically what agency, and then after all the news really broke and the prosecution started and, there was a lot of hot media attention on it, that intense focus,
Mm-hmm.
the proverbial mushroom cloud has gone off. That's what I meant in that post. There was a couple of those guys, who talked down to me on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
And there they were standing front and center in front of those news cameras. One of them got up there and spoke very eloquently about their ongoing efforts in this case and their tireless investigation and all this other BS. And I wanted to reach through the dang TV and strangle the guy.
Yeah.
But I couldn't. And, and even today, there's nothing that I'm going to say on this podcast it's not going to change or fix them. And, like I said, some of those guys, they ought to retire, move out of state, change their name.
Mm-hmm. That concludes part 1 of our episode on the evil, psychopathic scumbag, otherwise known as Billy Chemirmir. In part 2, we're going to dig into Chemirmir, the psychopath, not to be sensational, but to help you avoid people like this. Doug's going to describe the tactics he used, how he blended in, and how he was committing crimes right under people's noses. So if you haven't already subscribed, please do, so you'll be alerted when the next episode is published. Thank you for listening to Dark Minds, Shattered Lives. I'm Deborah Dobbs, and until next time, trust your gut and know your exits.